Beneath the sweltering African sun, a new empire is rising not with armies or flags, but with steel, concrete, and silence. Across the vast stretches of savanna and desert, something colossal is taking shape. Roads that stretch to the horizon, ports carved from ancient coastlines, railways that pierce through jungles once untouched by modern hands. To the casual observer, it looks like progress. But those who listen closely hear a different sound and echo of footsteps from far away, marching across continents, reshaping destinies. It is said that history never repeats, but the ghosts of empires have found new bodies to inhabit. And this time they speak Mandarin. For decades, Africa has been portrayed as a sleeping giant rich in soil, gold, and blood. Yet now, that giant stirs not from within, but under the careful guidance of an outside hand. China has moved quietly, methodically, weaving itself into the continent's veins with a precision that feels almost surgical. A dam here, a highway there, a glittering new capital rising from dust. To many, it's a story of partnership, of mutual growth, of a shared dream for a modern future. But beneath that polished narrative lies something older, something colder, a truth that whispers of control disguised as compassion. In 2013, when the Belt and Road Initiative was announced, the world saw it as an economic venture. But to those who study patterns of power, it looked more like a map of conquest. Through multi-billion-dollar loans, China began financing megaprojects in over 40 African nations. Ports in Kenya and Tanzania, rail lines in Ethiopia and Nigeria, industrial parks in Zambia, and even entire cities built from the ground up in Egypt and Angola. These are not the chaotic, corrupt constructions of old regimes. They are precise, efficient, almost eerily perfect, like the slow assembly of a colossal machine. The Nairobi-Mombasa Railway gleams like a silver scar across Kenya's heart. The great Ethiopian Renaissance Dam hums with an energy that could power a nation nor hold it hostage. In Djibouti, a port built with Chinese money sits just miles from the United States' only permanent military base in Africa. A quiet standoff invisible to most eyes, where influence replaces gunfire. Beijing insists it seeks no colonies, only cooperation. Yet the contracts are written in ways few Africans fully understand. The debts are heavy, the terms binding, and the ownership murky. What happens when a nation cannot pay? Who truly owns the infrastructure that defines its future? It's here the story darkens. Across the continent, whispers spread of ports seized, lands leased for centuries, and resources quietly funneled away under the guise of repayment. Zambia's national electricity grid. Sri Lanka's Hambantota port, examples that hang in the air like warnings, half-remembered curses. Some say China's deals are modern-day traps, spun in silk and steel rather than swords and chains. Others argue that Africa has chosen this path willingly, weary of Western interference and desperate for progress. But perhaps the truth is more haunting, that both sides are being pulled into a design far older than politics. A global web of dependence tightening with every completed project. And yet, amid this vast transformation, there is something almost mythic about what's unfolding. Entire landscapes are being rewritten by foreign architects, desert highways where once only wind moved. Power stations glowing in regions that had known darkness for centuries. Cities rising overnight, filled with empty glass towers awaiting tenants who may never come. These are not just buildings, they are symbols. And symbols, once planted, have a way of taking root in the human imagination. Africa is being reborn, yes, but whose image will it bear? The most unsettling part isn't what's visible, but what remains unseen. For every dam and railway, there are digital networks, satellites, and surveillance systems woven quietly in parallel. Huawei towers on African skylines, Chinese cameras in African capitals, data cables beneath African soil. Infrastructure not only of transport, but of information soft power disguised as connectivity. Through technology, language, and loans, influence seeps deeper than steel ever could. Some analysts whisper that Africa is becoming a testing ground, a place where China refines the art of empire without the stain of invasion. And as we trace this story through time, we cannot escape the parallels. The British once came bearing railways too. The French built ports, the Belgians laid roads, all in the name of progress. But those roads led inward, toward extraction, not empowerment. Now, the same tools return, polished, digital, and deniable, colonialism 2.0, some call it. But perhaps it's more subtle than that, less like conquest, more like seduction. The offering of a dream so grand, so glittering that it blinds even the wary. If you followed me this far into the shadows, then you already sense it, the pulse beneath the headlines, the pattern beneath the promise. And if this story makes you uneasy, it should. Because it's not just about Africa, it's about what comes next. Empires never announce their return, they whisper it through contracts, through construction cranes, through promises that sound too generous to refuse. You're watching the reshaping of a continent, and maybe, just maybe, the rehearsal for something larger. So before we go deeper, take a breath. If you're drawn to uncovering the truths they'd rather you never see, then stay close. Subscribe, not for updates but for revelations. Each video is a piece of a puzzle they've hidden in plain sight. And once you begin to see the pattern, you can never unsee it. The maps, the money, the motives, they all lead somewhere dark. Somewhere they don't want you to look. Now, back to the story. In the corridors of African parliaments, leaders speak of friendship and prosperity. But behind closed doors, Chinese delegations negotiate with precision. Infrastructure in exchange for influence, loans that bind nations for generations. The contracts are often confidential, the clauses complex, the translations imperfect. And when projects falter or debts rise, Beijing offers assistance, extensions, management rights, leases that last half a century. The ports stay open, the railways run, but the ownership quietly shifts. A century ago, the world called it colonization. Today, they call it partnership. In Angola, ghost cities gleam under the desert sun, built by Chinese workers who have since returned home. Thousands of apartments stand empty, waiting for citizens who cannot afford to live there. In Nigeria, the Lagos-Ibadan railway runs on Chinese-built engines maintained by Chinese engineers. In Kenya, citizens protest as their government struggles under loan payments for projects that promised profit but delivered loss. And yet, construction continues, always more, always forward, like a machine that cannot stop once it begins to move. To understand the scale, you must look not just at the structures, but at the silence surrounding them. Western nations, once dominant in African affairs, now watch uneasily. Their aid, once tied to political reform, cannot compete with the speed and simplicity of China's approach. No conditions, no lectures, just money, concrete, and quiet control. And perhaps that's why so many leaders accept. The West offered oversight, China offers opportunity. But every opportunity has a price, even if it isn't paid in cash. Across dusty borders, new railways connect mines to ports, ports to ships, ships to markets half a world away. Africa's riches flow outward faster than ever before. The minerals powering electric cars, the cobalt in smartphones, the copper in data cables all pass through this web of Chinese-built routes. Some call it progress, others call it extraction reborn. But perhaps it is something more haunting, a continent being hollowed out and refilled with someone else's design. And yet, there's another layer still. Some Africans see in this partnership a mirror of their own ambitions, a chance to rise without begging the West. Chinese investment brings jobs, schools, hospitals. Lives improve, at least for a while, but progress built on dependency is a fragile illusion. When one side holds the blueprint, the other merely lives inside it. The question is not whether Africa is changing, it's who is writing its future, word by word, contract by contract. Late at night, when the machinery rests and the cities sleep, the question lingers like a phantom in the wind. Has China given Africa the tools to build its destiny, or the keys to its new chains? The answer depends on who dares to look beneath the surface, to see the gears turning behind the gleaming facades. Because every empire, no matter how silent, leaves shadows in its wake. And perhaps that's the real story here, not one of nations or politics, but of patterns repeating through time. The empire that never dies only changes its name. The dream that always begins with roads and ends with rules. So tell me, as the cranes rise and the continent hums with promise, do you believe this is partnership or possession? Leave your thoughts below. The truth, after all, only grows stronger when it's spoken aloud.